présentation en anglais, mais nous vous accueillons à l'espace étudiant pendant la pause, où on va continuer avec notre présentation, la deuxième partie de notre recherche. Là aussi, vous pouvez nous demander des questions en français si vous voulez. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Anna, and this is Elise. We come from Chicago, Illinois, in the United States, where we both study at DePaul University, but we're here this year on exchange at Sciences Po. Because we live in a big city, we have a particular interest in today's topic of discussion about a contested urban space, which is Istanbul.
So during the first half of this session, we started talking about urban space as it relates to Turkish political identities. And then I'd like to continue this discussion, but with more emphasis on the development of the global city and urban regeneration, and more specifically the resistance to this phenomenon in greater depth.
So for those of you who are not familiar already with this phenomenon, the definition of urban regeneration is the rehabilitation of impoverished urban neighborhoods by large-scale renovation or reconstruction of housing and public works. So for our research, we wanted to better understand these projects in Istanbul, which seek to renovate or transform the city. But more specifically, we were interested in this process as a contested urban issue and as a threat to social justice in the city. So for that reason, we looked at the kind of activism going around this issue in resistance to the projects and the varying degrees to which the inhabitants are responding to this. So to better understand urban renovation in Istanbul, the term global city is key. So we can start with this quote by the former mayor of Istanbul, who then became the prime minister of Turkey and who is now the president of Turkey, a man we've all heard about, I'm sure, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is famous for really implementing this notion for the past 13 years or so. And he says that money is like mercury. It flows wherever there's a suitable channel, a secure ground for itself. If you can prepare this ground, it will come to you. Otherwise, it will flow somewhere else. We are determined to prepare this ground.
The concept of the global city serves as the primary justification for urban renewal projects. But what exactly does it mean to be a global city? Global cities are centers of finance, insurance, real estate, banking, marketing, business, trade, political power, innovation, communication, tourism, culture, and advanced infrastructure. Its proponents tell us that life is better in a global city, but not everyone agrees with them. There are many negative consequences of the development of the global city. For example, making the city global almost always results in gentrification, the demolition of homes, the degradation of the environment, the deterioration of the historical and cultural authenticity of the city, and an increase in income inequalities. So it's no wonder that there's a major resistance to urban transformation in Istanbul. And it's precisely this resistance that Anna and I would like to discuss today and come to a better understanding. But before we can really understand it, we have to have a better understanding of the history of the city and how it gave rise to Istanbul's current spatial, political, and social structure.
So as we already talked a little bit about, the 1980s welcomed a wave of neoliberal policies which swept the nation and consequently opened up the economy and invited in foreign investment. So during this time, historical centers and cultural hubs of Istanbul were sort of forgotten or neglected to make way for this new industry. And Istanbul experienced a vast socio-spatial change at this time. The 1990s were pretty much a continuation of the 80s, and that neoliberal policies were continuing to wash over the city, and the status of property at this time rose to be a key political and economic interest. The laws throughout the 1990s really encouraged a lot more foreign investment and investment in tourism.
In the 2000s, these neoliberal policies continued and intensified under consolidation of the AKP's political power. There were also many legal changes made at this point. In brief, they made it possible for the government, TOKI, and private investors to declare virtually any site in the city a renewal zone. These drastic legal changes opened the city up to the whims of private investment, rendering the city a source of capital accumulation, one of the most important characteristics of the global city. And it also resulted in the transformation of neighborhoods into groups of buildings, like the ones on the street behind me.
So, as you can see, this sort of futuresque animated image of a Toki renovated neighborhood is actually not far off from the reality of what they're constructing in Istanbul, which is pictured behind me. This is Sulu Kule. Toki boasts an approach to renewal that involves complete demolition and reconstruction processes of development on the designated site. And this method is really supposed to modernize Istanbul and bring it up to global city standards. But the truth is, the narrative behind these projects is a false reality. Most Istanbulites and even outsiders who don't live in Istanbul agree that the city is already rich with vibrant culture that has been cultivated throughout centuries of the city's ancient history, and it doesn't need these expensive, glitzy projects to prove that. And so that is why urban regeneration is such a contested issue in Istanbul, and because of its hidden political agenda.
And it doesn't stop there. Because urban regeneration makes city space so much more expensive, it makes living in the city extremely unaffordable, and therefore pushes out low-income populations. This process of gentrification is particularly fast in Istanbul with the markets alone, but it's also pushed by the government in Toki, who deliberately displace people to open their neighborhoods up to private investment. Thanks to the legal changes implemented by the AKP, Toki has the right to demolish any area that it deems as derelict, blighted, risky, obsolescent, unsafe, illegal, a transformation or renewal area, or most ironically, an area of historical or cultural importance. So essentially anyone, but especially the urban poor, can be subject to this injustice. And many people are. In fact, Toki's own website states that it plans to demolish 6.5 million homes in the next 20 years. And even though they claim that these changes are for the best, those who are displaced are given little realistic economic or social alternatives, basically leaving them to fight for themselves in an increasingly volatile housing market. And then on top of that, the city's urban regeneration projects also result in urban sprawl. This is especially the case with the mega projects like the third bridge, the canal, and the airport that put the region's environment and precious water resources at risk.
So, although the global city concept is supposed to promote positive transformation in the city, it has proved rather to threaten various domains of urban life. And as a result, we've seen a number of groups who have spoken out. So, for example, there's the Union Chamber of Architects, which works against the degradation of cultural authenticity in the city. Individuals from the various communities under projected renewal zones have organized in resistance. They have neighborhood solidarities. Groups like Istanbul Kentsodanasi organized to protect green spaces. And of course there's the political left and activists who speak out with blogs and other creative platforms to oppose the commercialization of the city and the rise of neoliberal practices and the strength of finance, etc. So as resistance groups make a name for themselves, these regeneration projects in Istanbul are gaining increasingly negative connotations. We talked about threatened cultural authenticity, neighborhood demolitions, ecological degradation, and a commercialization of the city. But what do all these have in common? They're pretty much all driven by the consolidation of the AKP's power. In 2013, all of these concerns came together to challenge the authoritarianism of the AKP under the concept of reclaiming the city.
Gezi obviously played a major role in the development of this resistance. Before you could say that the resistance was fragmented, for example, the left generally didn't participate in any protests that involved urban space, with the exception of protests against the demolitions of low-income housing. This was despite the fact that they were fighting for the same rights that the Chamber of Architects were fighting for, and that the environmental activists were fighting for. But this changed during the Gezi protests when they recognized that they all shared this common mission to reclaim the city. All of a sudden, people began to perceive space as something that's not merely material, but also political, and that can also serve as an arena for direct democracy to challenge the ruling party. In this sense, as one of the leading activists in the Gezi movement and the head of the Chamber of Architects told us, it gave rise to a new culture of resistance. And it was also, of course, at Gezi that the resistance was able to connect and grow their networks, creating a larger and stronger resistance.
A major concern of our research was that the human element of the global city is so often swallowed by rhetoric or overshadowed by the common narrative, both of which fabricate ideas like development and prosperity and modernity that we hear so much. Academic research and governmental resources on the topic are often really cold and disconnected from the human reality of the urban space, and they thus sort of seek to confine the definition of urban renewal to a simple definition, and one that somehow explains it as a natural process of globalization. But we were interested in what the people had to say in making a human connection to this phenomenon that would enliven the research, but also reveal the complexity of the issue because it is so tied to the human actor. And it was exactly this human complexity that we saw that revealed the many nuances of the resistance that is still happening in Istanbul today. We went with the intention of speaking to people who are involved in the resistance, which we did, but our idea of resistance was greatly expanded by the diversity of the responses that we got from people who we met, which really led us to call into question what we considered the resistance to be, namely not just getting, but we did not rely fully on just statistics and data to tell us about this resistance, but rather we spoke to the true Istanbulites whose stories of simply living in this dynamic city revealed the various notions and layers of resistance and how they're all sort of interrelated. Not everyone who we spoke to actually even directly identified with the movement, and they said that they were not involved, they didn't consider themselves a part of the resistance. But everyone did seem to be in agreement that their lives in Istanbul were being enveloped by commercialism and profit making.
So the resistance that we saw in Istanbul was extremely diverse, but at the same time we noticed a lot of similarities amongst the people we talked to. One very common motif was the inclusive and democratic nature of the resistance. For example, one night we sat in on a public meeting in Kadıköy where members openly discussed issues of social justice in their community. And we saw the same sort of inclusiveness across the board with everyone from the Chamber of Architects to bloggers to the academics that we spoke to. And we also noticed that the resistance was quite international, supporting and taking support and ideas from other resistance movements around the world in places like Brazil, Greece, Sardinia, and Germany. Of course, it goes without saying that the resistance is quite liberal, but it's hard to define the resistance as being entirely one thing because since it's not an organized organization, it doesn't have a single expressed ideology and therefore it represents many different ideas. It includes everyone from anti-capitalist bloggers to religiously conservative Gecekondu residents to a moderate 20-year-old law student who simply doesn't like the ugly buildings that are sprouting up along the Bosphorus. And, of course, some people resist outside of the traditional framework of social movement theory. Asif Fayyad, a professor of global and transnational studies and sociology at the University of Illinois, termed this type of resistance as non-movements or collective actions of non-collective actors. And in Istanbul, individuals take part in these non-movements by doing things like unlawfully building their homes on property, creating neighborhoods on lands that technically isn't theirs, but through their presence, they assert their right to the city. In Istanbul, this non-movement includes shimit vendors who don't have a license, but consider themselves just as deserving of the city's space as the Burger King that's down the street. And it also includes the displaced family who, when asked where they'll live after the demolition of their house in Başkent, says that they'll probably just go and build another illegal home elsewhere. And on top of that, these non-movements often lead to the development of more direct resistance that take the form of legal claims or the formation of neighborhood associations, which are really common in Istanbul.
So in our conversations with the people who we spoke to, it was really clear how much intersectionality there was within the groups working for resistance, this multidimensional resistance. So take, for example, an urban planner for the municipality who we spoke to and an academic in the field of architecture who we spoke to. They would both certainly disagree about the social implications of urban renewal projects, but their opinions converged when they're talking about their grave concern with the political system driven by profit. So even though neither of these two consider themselves part of the resistance, their concern about the future of Istanbul does not eliminate them from the resistance. And in fact, it shows how they parallel each other, though they come from totally opposite spectrums. A common theme that we heard amongst these people was the idea of alternative political institutions as a end result. So a blogger, his name was Yashar Adanali, and the filmmaker Emre Azem, who we spoke to, talked a lot about this idea at a conference that we attended, on urban spaces. Yashar writes a blog called Reclaim Istanbul, and much of the idea behind reclaiming the city is the people, in fact, reclaiming their lives from a system that commodifies life. And the conference had a live stream video connection with activists in Munich and Sao Paulo, Brazil, where everyone was discussing these issues, and they were all very much in agreement about the goal of urban resistance in the 21st century, which will be to loosen the neoliberal grip on cities and this grip on the lives of the people. And so one question that we've entertained is, then, if this sort of resistance is already gaining ground in the world's most up-and-coming global cities at a transnational local level, what will it look like as it grows and evolves in the coming years? So, so a question that we've entertained is that if this resistance is already gaining ground in the world's most up-and-coming global cities, such as Munich and Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Istanbul, at the transnational local level, then what will it look like as it grows and evolves moving forward? So if the people continue to mobilize successfully, such a movement in Istanbul could really serve as a model for this sort of political and social change at the global political level, that is.
And a model could actually serve great use because sadly this phenomenon is not limited at all to Istanbul. The picture behind us is Sao Paulo, and as you can see, these projects greatly resemble what we see in Istanbul. And they generally have the same effects on the people and on the socio-spatial structure of the city, and that they result in the demolition of homes, gentrification, etc., etc. Resistance is also present elsewhere. In Brazil, there are obviously street protests, like the ones we saw this past summer. In addition to Occupy movements, the production of documentaries, social networking, and the like. So in other words, just as global cities are becoming ubiquitous, resistance to them is becoming just as ubiquitous.
So there are thousands of injustices happening in the world every day, and especially in Istanbul's particular geographic region. But we chose this one because we think that issues of urban renewal in Istanbul alone touch millions of people in millions of unique ways, and they reach far beyond the domain of simply housing and real estate. But as an outsider, take a second to think about the idea of home, a space where you feel safe, where you feel comfortable and at ease, and that the forces of government who are supposed to be protecting the well-being of the people are crushing you. And it's a tricky situation. It's hard to talk about because the world may view it as a natural process of globalization, or a direct result of your very own elections in your country. Furthermore, outsiders may even embrace the idea of development and economic progression or integration in your region, but meanwhile your home is being bulldozed before your very eyes, and the city that you call home is being swept out from under your feet, and it's all happening very, very quickly. And we found that there's a ton of research on this topic, and much of the work that is put out by governmental organizations still place this cold idea of development and progress by hard economic standards before the human perspective that lives and breathes. So, meanwhile, so few of it makes a really conscious effort to incorporate or even demonstrate the complexity of the process itself using the lens of the human actor. So, who is the human involved? Who are the people here? And what is the future of a globalized world that doesn't consider the human lens to the extent that it should be considered?
To hear more about what the people resisting in Istanbul have to say, you can join us in the Espace Étudiant during the break.
Merci, monsieur Akkouche, de nous avoir rejoints avec eux.
façon dont les villes, la mobilisation, les résistances, les changements des villes, global city, mega city, il faut Istanbul, global city, pas. Mais la globalisation, c'est comment les informations, les images, les mobilisations, les résistances circulent à travers le globe et qui ont un effet quelque part, ils ont des effets partout et qui remettent en cause justement à la fois le côté local, national, identitaire et global. Et c'est en fait qui remettent en cause mais qui les articulent en même temps. J'ai beaucoup aimé les images des films télévisés, des séries télévisées. Effectivement, il m'est arrivé de regarder quelques épisodes quand je suis à Istanbul et que tout le monde regarde et je n'ai pas le choix. Soit je regarde. Et puis, il y a un phénomène historique, identitaire et nationaliste qui combine l'idée de la nation et de l'islam. Je suis d'accord avec vous. Et je suis d'accord avec Nil Fernande qui dit que c'est le modèle qu'on veut exporter de l'image de la Turquie, avec un monsieur tout à l'heure pendant le break m'a parlé des contrastes, effectivement, avec tout le contraste que représente cet islam turc et la Turquie elle-même en fait. Et le modèle à ce niveau culturel est accepté. Je suis d'ailleurs curieuse de savoir comment ce modèle de l'alcool, des scènes de sexe, d'amour, etc. sont représentés. Et si je peux dire, dans la presse, souvent, il y a des entretiens avec les acteurs principaux, le turc ou je ne sais trop qui disent que mais dans la vie quotidienne, les jeunes s'embrassent. Donc, on va s'embrasser dans les films. Alors que peut-être il y a 10 ans, les personnes ne s'embrassaient dans les films. En tout cas, quand j'étais gamine, non, c'était interdit, je me souviens. Mais donc, si vous voulez, ce modèle qui est exporté, c'est un modèle qui est très local et qui a l'intention d'être un modèle, mais qui devient global par l'intérêt. En fait, ce n'est pas un modèle en soi, c'est quelque chose global dans la mesure où tous les jeunes aspirent à l'esthétique, à la beauté, aux scènes, aux histoires, même s'il y a une connotation historique derrière. Et je retrouve la même chose par rapport à vos vies. J'ai pensé à un cas, justement, qui devient à la fois local, transnational et global. C'est un quartier d'Istanbul qui s'appelle Sulukule, qui était le quartier des Roms, et qui a été, vous avez posé la question des sites culturels, ça a été classé comme site culturel par l'UNESCO.